HVAC 360, episode number 18, Virtual CX. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of HVAC 360. I'm your host, Matt Nelson. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking to Mark Walter, who is the principal and founder of Virtual Commissioning. Now, Mark actually has a very unique business strategy. Really, he's kind of providing supplemental commissioning services to just about anybody, whether or not you're a big organization that just needs a little bit of a stability managing the manpower, or a small commissioning firm that just needs some help to kind of level some of the loads that they may have. So I hope you enjoy the episode with Mark, and here we go. All right, today we're going to be talking with Mark Walter, who is the principal and founder of Virtual Commissioning. How you doing, Mark?
Hey, good, man. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Tell me a little bit about your background here.
Well, I've been in the air conditioning business since '73. I started out as a helper crawling under houses, putting in ductwork, and fairly quickly realized that wasn't the way I wanted to keep going. And so once I graduated to attics, I eventually became a technician, then a project manager, controls tech, project manager. And back in the mid-'90s, got into commissioning. Along the way, in the world of commissioning, I worked for a large national commissioning firm. And I had a couple of interesting experiences that sort of opened my mind up to some possibilities that eventually led to the founding of Virtual Commissioning. One of them was that I was doing a medium-sized hospital in Richmond, Virginia, a new hospital. And at the time, I had a pretty heavy project load, and we ended up subbing out some of the work to a sub-consultant, a guy that worked with the company I was working for on a sub-consultant basis versus being an employee. And this fellow by the name of Jim. And Jim ended up pretty much running that whole project. I was the project manager, but I would be brought in from time to time by Jim for the commissioning meetings. Anything that was kind of like trying to bring in the PM. And over the course of the project, it just became so clear what a great idea this was, because as a PM, I had a guy under me that was running the job at a fixed cost. And when I compared that to a lot of other projects where we had junior PMs, project engineers, and techs, jobs would often go over budget. And I get down to the end of the project and be kind of scrambling as to how in the world we're going to finish this with no budget left. Whereas the project that had the sub-consultant on it, I knew what my fees were going to be. We got to the end of the project, and the company I was working for had predicted profit left over. And it just got me to thinking, man, I bet there's a lot of other guys that could benefit from an experience like this. At the time, I wasn't thinking about starting my own business, but it did plant a seed that eventually became, the impetus for starting Virtual Commissioning.
So I guess at what point did you decide, hey, you know what, I've had enough, or was it like one singular event, or was it just over a period of a year that you decided to start your own thing?
Well, I don't know. I don't know that there's any particular point, but in combination with that insight, there's another series of events that was happening simultaneously. When I started with that firm, that particular company kind of divided, like so many companies do. They divided the American territory up in areas, and the regional manager for that area had said when I first came on board, Mark, one of the problems that I'm having is that I've not learned how to effectively teach people to do test writing. I just have a real struggle with this, and what happens is I think that my staff knows how, and some test writing will come up. It'll come across my desk for review, and I end up having to redo the whole thing myself. And we've really got to figure out how to do a better job at that. And I was sort of tasked to help figure that out, and I thought it was kind of funny at the time because I had no idea how to do test writing either. And I think in retrospect that was probably really good because I was coming in so green. I found the best way, or I found over just the course of my life, the best way to, if you don't know how to do something, is just say, hey, I don't know, and not be ashamed to ask the dumb questions. So I started asking the dumb questions, and in the process, learned how to kind of break down test writing and get my test writing to the point that my boss said, hey, I see you get it. And eventually another person or two in that office started to learn my boss's way of writing tests. So in the process of doing that, what I saw was, in terms of test writing, which commissioning has a lot of that, there's kind of a light, medium, and heavy approach. Light being a piece of paper with some check boxes that says pass or fail, and heavy being the type of tests that end up being used in data centers or in labs where every nuance is tested, and the tests are poured over by committees before they're released into use. And so, again, this was just another experience that I walked away from saying, there's got to be a better way to do this. And my boss was really struggling with how to get her staff improved. It took me a long time to kind of sort through it. And so there was just sort of a perfect storm of events that happened, at least in my mind, with respect to the concept of a better way of doing things. Virtual commissioning was founded not because I think commercial or virtual commissioning is better than anybody, but it was just founded on the principle that we can find better ways to do things if we sit down and kind of put our minds to it.
Now, what sort of services do you provide as far as virtual commissioning goes?
Well, the firm is a commissioning firm, but it was founded to help other commissioning firms. So roughly 90% of the company's customers are other commissioning firms. So in a sense, we're not competitors. We provide a service, and the service that virtual commissioning provides is kind of two or threefold. The first being that if a company needs some test writing or documentation work done, things that you don't necessarily have to get on a plane or get in a car and go do, we provide those services. And the same with regard to field testing. Virtual commissioning can be seen as kind of a leveling tool. If your staff is overloaded or you've got a few too many projects going on right now, it's a leveling tool for personnel. But it's also a tool where the guy goes, I've had a lot of guys tell me this, Mark, I can write these tests, but I really don't want to or really don't have time to. And it's great to find a firm that can kind of fill in that slot, and I don't have to worry about it. I can go about my business. So there's two aspects to it: to help with labor, help with some of the more technical aspects of the documentation. And then finally, the third aspect, which we moved into roughly 2 years ago, which is cloud-based commissioning.
So now, if somebody wanted to use your service, how does the process work? If you talk about, I need some help writing these tests that you're talking about, what's the process they'd follow?
Well, it's pretty simple. We just provide a price like anybody does. We just look at the size of the job, and we kind of work several ways with our clients. And one is that we provide a firm quote. Secondly, sometimes the client will come back and say, hey, this is my budget, and, can you do it for a percentage of this? Generally speaking, we approach a project in terms of what documentation are we going to provide. Are we going to provide design review, commissioning plan? Are we going to write the tests, do the final report, do the systems manual for the lead? Which of those are we providing, or all of them? And then, so that's one question. And then the second question is, do you need us to do any labor out in the field?
So, I mean, do people just, once you have that agreement saying, okay, you know what, I need a couple of tests, a systems manual maybe, a commissioning plan, I guess you just exchange documentation at that point in time, and then you'll look at it and see if it's enough and want more. Is that kind of the process? And then once you get the whole thing compiled, then you'll send it back for review. I'm just trying to get, just the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, that's generally how it happens. And, you're touching on an interesting point, which is how you exchange the information. One of the key elements for virtual commissioning is something called cloud-based commissioning. And I'll define that in a moment. But I think you'll see the definition as I start to talk about it. What we first encountered when we wanted to exchange information was, how do we do that physically? The way guys typically do that is you exchange through email, but then attachment size becomes the limitation. FTP sites, costs can become a limitation. And so we started investigating the best way to do that. Do we use services like, I forget what they're called, where you send files back and forth. And as we started looking into this, one of the things that started leaking out was, when you're sending files back and forth, how do you organize that, particularly if it's a lot of files? And generally speaking, people do that with FTP sites. We ended up going in the direction of developing the concept of putting a project management site on the web, tailoring it to commissioning, and uploading and downloading all the documents there. And it was, at first, that was our one and only intention. It was something for just us and our customers. But as we looked into the wide variety of software that's out and available on the cloud, it quickly became apparent that a tool that can be used to transfer files back and forth and to organize files can become something else as well. And it didn't take us too long to start realizing that we can actually manage commissioning projects on the web. And so this led us into the world of cloud-based commissioning.
It's fascinating. Yeah, personally, I know that that file transfer thing is a big thing, and how to organize it. And if you try to use a lot of different content management systems, like your Microsoft SharePoint and things like that, you might get the structure that you like, but really to be able to manipulate files and transfer files, it becomes very slow. So I know that I've had my own personal issues with that sharing back and forth.
Right, and so, how do you share, and how do you share if you're a small firm? Because while on the one hand, some of our firms that we do work for are large firms, most of the work that we do are for smaller firms that don't necessarily have the same tools in place that the bigger guys do. And in fact, a lot of the bigger guys don't as well. And another thing sort of started to emerge is that, hey, if we're starting to put our files on the web, what exactly does that mean? And like, so many other companies these days, we quickly tuned into the fact that if we have our files on the web, that means that any of us at any time can go in there and grab something with any device. And so the next sort of logical evolution of our thinking was, well, what device? And this kind of led us into the world of using the iPad for testing. And that was kind of a mind-opening experience. Cloud-based commissioning has been around for a while. I recall maybe as long as 10 years ago coming across a firm based in Maryland that had developed a cloud, well, it wasn't so much cloud-based commissioning product, but a web-based commissioning product that organized files, and you could write tests on it. But where the cloud recently has come into, let's call it clearer focus in the world of commissioning, it's just opening up the accessibility of not just documentation, but how you commission. It's kind of, we find that the cloud is stretching the envelope in terms of making us think about how we're doing our work. Why do we ask questions like, why do we have to do it the way we've always done it? So it's a challenge that's a challenge in a good way.
So now, speaking of challenges, in the early days of virtual commissioning, what were some of the biggest challenges that you saw?
Well, putting aside the challenges of growing a small business, the biggest challenge that I saw and still see is a willingness or lack of willingness to embrace new tools. And this doesn't really have anything to do with our company. It just has to do with an operating philosophy that new ideas and new ways of doing things can bring, into our thinking.
Okay. So now, typically, are most of the products that you send out to people, are they electronic formats that you're sharing back and forth? Do you ever send out hard copies or anything like that?
What we generally do, Matt, is we'll say in our proposals that everything that we do is electronic. We will send CDs or DVDs. We do not do paper documentation. In the beginning, there was some reticence on the part of our customers and their customers to agree to that, mostly because people were just in the habit. But to be honest, it really doesn't take most people long to say, hey, I don't want paper copies, because what happens to the paper copies if we make 6 or 8 or 10 volumes of a final commissioning report? And these are documents that could be 100 pages long, 500, 1,000 pages long, or more. And, when that ends up going to the end customer, where does it go? It ends up going into a dusty room down in the basement. It's a document that no one ever reads. And so people quickly glommed on to saying, yes, I only want electronic documents. And, we're not in any way trying to take credit for that movement. I mean, we were sort of piggybacking on a movement that was already emerging within the construction industry. So to go from paper to electronic has been something that we found has been readily embraced, and I honestly can't remember the last time that we submitted a paper document.
Now, as far as format goes, a lot of companies would have, say, hey, all my forms, they look like this. If they want to use your service, is it integratable, or do you have your own forms that you might be able to change the header and the footer, and that's about it? Or how do you go about customizing these documents for your clients?
Well, another good question, and it's one that we had at the very beginning. And our first thought at the beginning was, hey, we'll come in, and when we do work for you, we'll just be like one of your staff. It'll be very seamless. So if we happen to go out in the field and do some field testing, if you want us to, we'll carry your business card with our name on it. And for all intents and purposes, we'll look like you. And we'll do the same thing with the documentation. But what we quickly learned was that there's 1,000 ways to build a box, and because there's 1,000 ways doesn't mean that each way is the best way. And so what started to emerge was a series of questions about what is the best document. So we were faced with two things. The first is it wasn't efficient for us to learn how to create documents the way and replicate exactly how our customers was doing it. And secondly, that there was an operating philosophy or a practical philosophy that our documents had to meet that in-house produced documents didn't necessarily have to meet. And here's what that was. If I produce a document for myself to go test an air handler, and I make it one page long, I can look at that document because I produced it, and I understand my intent, no matter how cryptic the document gets. On the other hand, if I'm making it for you, I might not get away with a one-page document because maybe you've never done commissioning before, or maybe you have, but you're not used to doing it with somebody else's document. So we quickly realized that we had to make documents that were repeatable, that somebody besides ourselves could go use, that they would intuitively understand. And once the light bulb kind of went off in our mind about that, it was pretty simple to go to the next step and basically just tell our customers, hey, this is how we do it. Here's why we do it this way. And we're open to any suggestions, and if there's some particular things that you want included, we'll be happy to do that. Generally speaking, I'd say well over 90% of the time, our customers have just said, hey, whatever you think, that's fine with us. And I'm including customers that range from a one-person firm to a 100-person commissioning firm.
Okay, makes sense. Now, as far as a lot of the a lot of times, I guess commissioning agents will have specialties, like they've been exposed to, whether they be schools or higher ed, or even possibly hospitals or other data centers or things like that. Are there certain, I guess, building types that you specialize in, or is it just kind of all over the place?
Well, we all kind of gravitate toward our background. So my background is controls, and when I take a look at a job, I'm going to tend to lean toward my bias if I'm going to review something. And in this case, it would be controls, where another commissioning agent may have an electrical background, know very little about controls. And so if they go to look at a job, they're just going to see electrical. And so, commissioning is no different than design firms, for example, in that we hopefully learn to recognize our biases and offset them. So what we do is when we find something that's kind of coming up on our radar that we're not familiar with, if we have somebody on staff that can do that, great. If not, we just sub-consult it out. I think you'll find most commissioning firms, even rather large ones, do that most commissioning firms focus on HVAC. A few have electrical folks on board. Very few have somebody structural on board that's qualified, for example, to check the building envelope. So on the occasion where a building envelope is in the scope, most firms are going to go out and hire a sub-consultant to come in for that.
Now, I guess you bring up a good point. Most of, I think of most of the complicated systems and tests being, centered around the HVAC and HVAC systems. But when you get to electrical and building envelope, obviously I know that I've heard rumors that building envelope is going to be more online with the LEED 2012 edition. But, whether or not it shows up, it definitely is one of the areas that people are starting to look at to do more commissioning. So are those some of the things that you can handle as far as tests go?
Well, yes and no. There's, as new things kind of creep into the scope, we're like everybody else. We'll just take a look at our current qualifications and our current library of tests and see if there's a fit. Then if not, we try to figure out, well, what do we do about that? So, I mean, the quick answer is it depends.
Okay. Now, I guess you have the different products that are on online. You have the new, I guess the commissioning cloud, or what was the name of it?
Well, we have a product that we call Virtual CX, which is our cloud-based commissioning, and this is a website that's a project management website with a strong commissioning tilt. So here's what I mean by that. When we show up on a project and we show up for a commissioning kickoff meeting, one of the things that we do is we introduce this website, and we just tell everybody, hey, here's somewhere where you can upload and download documents. It's password protected, and it's pretty intuitive, and we give a little 5-minute demo and see a lot of head shakes, and at the end of the kickoff meeting, we register everybody, and generally speaking, they start using it. Another thing that we do is we run the commissioning issues log off of that site as well. Historically, the commissioning issues or deficiencies log has been run using an Excel spreadsheet. There's been some variations, but typically that's how it's been done. And we're no longer doing that. We just have a section on the website where the issues are listed. The responsible party is assigned. We can assign dates and priorities, and then any member of the team can come in, review their issues. And here's the part that's kind of neat, is we've enabled or empowered them to go ahead and close their own issues. One reason I say that's neat is that the trend in the past has been that the commissioning authority or agent is the only person that closes an issue. And this departure that we're supporting from a somewhat traditional way of running an issues log is kind of a microcosm of some of the advantages of web-based commissioning. To clarify that, when you run an Excel spreadsheet, whether it's as a commissioning issues log or a punch list, to get things closed, to get responses back from people, you either have to have meetings or send that spreadsheet out, get people to respond, and then somebody has to gather the responses from a variety of sources and put those back into the source document and then redistribute it. That's a process that can take days and oftentimes weeks to kind of close the loop full circle on one iteration. And then you have to do it again next month or the month after. We're compared to having a checklist online that the responsible party can go in and close their own issue as soon as they finish it. It takes no power or authority away from, quote, the commissioning authority, because that person can always go and back check the closed issue. But what it does do is give transparency to the whole team, A, because anybody at any time, including the owner, can go on the site and see what the issues are and what the status of them are. And B, it really speeds up the process. And by speeding up the process, it's not just that issues can be closed quicker, it's that it's just easier to use. Somebody can be sitting on a train commuting and jump on their smartphone or iPad, and as long as they've got web access, they can go in there and hit a few check boxes, and they've completed their task instead of having to go home at night and start their computer, open up an Excel spreadsheet, and type in responses. So one of the big advantages of any cloud-based tool, in my opinion, is its potential to save both time and money.
Now, is this something that the companies can go and rebrand if they want to put their logo on there, or is it pretty much as is, just a service that you're putting out there?
It's a service that the default is our brand, but for our customers, what we say in our website is, hey, if you give us work, we're going to give you the site for free for the duration of the project. We define the duration of the project being 12 months from substantial completion. So we'll run that site all the way through the warranty phase. And in that case, when we do provide it, we rebrand each project with our customer's logo.
Excellent. So, and that's being received pretty well, I take it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, our point isn't to put our name in front of our customers. Our point is to help make our customers successful. And so we have no problem with them saying, hey, Virtual CX is, my product, or it's a product that I support, or I've got a licensing agreement with it. However they want to put that, that's up to them. But when their customers log in, when their end users log in, when their contracting team, design team logs in, what they see is the logo of ABC Company staring them in the face.
So what's next for virtual commissioning?
Next step for us is just more efficient test forms. This all sounds a bit dry, but in the world of commissioning, these are things that can really take up a lot of time for commissioning staff and for commissioning team members, is all that sort of behind-the-scenes documentation. Most people that aren't intimately familiar with commissioning look at it in terms of, a man or woman showing up out in the field to do testing and hold a series of meetings. But there's just that's sort of the tip of the iceberg. There's just a mountain of documentation that goes on behind the scenes. And so one of our goals since we moved into the cloud was to come up with some test forms that we could not only produce better, but would be easier for our clients to use. So one way that we're defining what makes a form easier, I alluded to earlier, is that it's simple, it's easy to understand, it's clear. It can be picked up by somebody who's not really familiar with maybe my forms. You could pick it up and go, hey, I see what Mark is talking about. But there's another aspect to it that we have not addressed yet that we're beginning to address, which is the actual filling out of the form. The way that people do that now, there's really two ways. The first way is print the test forms out and write on them in a notebook when you're in the field. At that point, that either becomes the record, or the commissioning agent or technician will take the forms home or back to the office, and they'll take the chicken scratch that's on the paper, and they'll transpose that back on into their computer. So they've added a really big step by doing that, a lot of extra time to have to clean that up. The second way they do it is that they just type it into the computer in the first place. That also takes a lot of time. That slows you down in the field. It speeds you up on the back end, but it slows you down in the field because the team is now having to wait for somebody to type and input into a computer to find their place in a document, a test document that could be 200 pages long. So our thought is, what can we do to improve that and make that faster? And so instead of typing, can we optimize for iPads so that you can take your finger and just touch a checkbox that says pass or fail, and a check will magically appear? The answer is, of course you can do that. So that's kind of our next thing is we're hoping to release, at least for ourselves, if not for our customers, a new generation of tests by the end of 2011.
Excellent. So, on a different topic, I always love to ask my interviewees, just kind of from your background, things that you've experienced in the past, a couple of lessons learned that you might pass on to our audience. That you can, whether obviously commissioning would be a perfect example of things that you found that didn't go quite right, or solutions that you've had to unique problems. What can you offer for us?
Well, my lessons learned focus on the aspect of project management that is not always talked about, which is the more subjective and soft skill sides of project management. I'll give you an example of what I mean. Project management traditionally is thought of as, using the tools and skills to get a job to come in on time, under budget, and meet a certain quality level that the customer expects. But the softer skills, in my experience, the interpersonal skills, are the ones that come into play far more often. I took a project management course one time from a gentleman by the name of Jim Lewis out of Virginia, and Jim is widely recognized as one of the leading trainers of project managers around the nation, in fact, around the world. Jim has trained with companies as large as Boeing and the train company down to, small 1- and 2-man shops. And Jim maintains the same philosophy that 90+% of what you do as a project manager has to do with those soft skills. And so my story about that, my example about that, is a typical commissioning meeting. When I first started doing commissioning, Matt, I came in like every other commissioning agent to a commissioning kickoff meeting with a 100 or 200 page document. They weren't always that long. Some of them were 60 pages long, called a commissioning plan. And we would sit down in the kickoff meeting, and around the table would be some designers, the general contractor, owner representatives, and a bunch of subcontractors. And as soon as a commissioning person, in this case me, would sit down and say, well, we're here to go over the commissioning plan, everybody's eyes would glaze over. And whether they'd been through it or not, their eyes would glaze over, as mine would too, sitting in their chair, because it was just really boring stuff. And so, I started to wonder, well, what is it that'll keep that from happening, aside from not going over the commissioning plan? What is it that's causing the eyes to glaze over? It's not just the length of the document and the dryness of the material, but it can also be the approach of the individual that's leading that commissioning team. Commissioning people are, fall into, categories just like the general population. Some of us are shy and some of us are more assertive, and in the world of commissioning, there was at least at one time a reputation that the commissioning people were kind of policemen. They're coming in to kind of put everybody in their place. And the sort of unspoken projection was, we're the guys that are here to protect the quality interest of the owner. But my lesson learned is that we're not the guys that are there to protect the quality interest of the owner. Everybody sitting around that table is interested in that. And we're not coming in to point fingers. We're coming in to be part of the team. And so it's an approach that has less to do with personality and more to do with empowering everybody to be successful.
Excellent. All right. So if anybody is interested in procuring your services, what's the best and easiest way to go about that? Is that just visiting the website, or a number to call, or
the best way would just be to go to the website, virtualcx.com, check out what the firm has to offer, see if there's a potential match. If there is, there's a contact form there, and just fill out the contact form.
Okay. Is there any easy way that is there any small way that people can get involved to kind of, get a taste of your services, just to see what they're like?
Well, there is. Of course, you can just try some stuff out. We have sample documents we can send folks. We also run the largest commissioning blog in the United States, so there are hundreds of articles on our site about commissioning. There are hundreds of links to articles that other people have written and resources. So it can be a really good site to go to kind of delve into what's happening in the world of commissioning. We also have a very active Twitter feed, probably the most active in terms of commissioning anywhere in the world. So if you want to find out more about commissioning, that's one way to do it. If you want to find more about us, we've got some sample documents on the site. They're kind of scaled back, but if somebody says, hey, can I just see something a little more robust than that, we're happy to send it to them.
Okay. And your Twitter handle is VirtualCX?
It's VirtualCX.
Perfect. All right, Mark. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down and talk with us a little bit more about the virtual commissioning and VirtualCX, and I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for your interest.
And we're back. All right. Well, you know what? I really, again, want to extend a thank you to Mark taking his time out of his schedule to talk to us today. I think it's really a fascinating company. Ever since I saw it and kind of wanted to know more about it, I always thought that it was a very, very unique way to go to market. Commissioning is such a process-heavy business. And I think Mark has really found a great niche to be able to provide those supplemental services to a wide variety of clients. So, again, thanks to Mark, and thank you for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. It's a great pleasure to be able to do these episodes for you and to have you enjoy them, and to be able to see that there's a lot of people out there listening to this podcast. So I appreciate each and every one of you. And again, like I say before, every single time, is that you are very special. You are great in what you're doing. You are doing the right things and constantly learning. And I'm just happy to provide an additional outlet for you to be able to learn and to be able to just basically have content that's specifically designed for you. So that's pretty much it. If you liked the episode or you thought it was interesting, you can let me know at matt@buildingx.co, or you can follow me on Twitter and just you can direct message me there. My handle is BuildingX. Also, you can go and drop a comment or a suggestion or give me feedback on my blog at buildingx.co. So, that's it for this week. There's more to come next week. It's getting exciting here, and we've managed to do this for a number of episodes now. So we got about 6 or 7 down on the new format, and we're just rolling with it. So I'm glad that we're keeping the momentum going, and we're issuing them every Sunday night, thereabouts, to be able to get it out to you every weekday, or every week, I should say. And we'll just keep on doing that. And so until next time, remember, know what you build, and share what you know.